So today, in our deep dive into our in-depth question on human behavior, we have the topic of silencing your inner critic. So welcome to today. We're going to have a deep dive into the topic of self-criticism and some strategies to silence your inner critic that you have that maybe sometimes feel like it runs your mind as opposed to you running your mind. And so before we get started, I'd just like to say, if you have any comments, you love any of the content, feel free to just share it in the comments below. And if you have any questions, you can also do that too. So let's get an understanding of self-criticism. What is it? Why do we experience it? How does it affect our life? And what can we do? What are some top strategies that we can do to silence it? So why do we want to work through this? Like, why do we want to actually go and silence our self-critic? And I just want you to imagine this and picture this, that you're sitting in a cafe and you see two people sitting together and they're having a conversation and you happen to just be like eavesdropping into their conversation. And one of the individuals is talking to the other one saying like, why are you so slow? Why can't you figure this out? Like, are you stupid? Like, why are you so fat? Maybe that's why the reason why you're unlovable and no one wants you. You're useless. You can't coach people. That you're never going to make a great coach. And who can you help anyway? Because you've got your own stuff that you're trying to work through. And so you've got your own stuff. Like, how are you actually going to coach someone else? So some of this conversation, if you're listening into that, you think, well, that's a bit harsh, or it's maybe you'd label it as abusive. If it was you, you'd be like, I'd stand up, get up and walk away. But that is the internal dialogue of some people, of us sometimes, that we have on certain topics or certain areas of life. Maybe it's your physical body, maybe it's your business or your intimate relationship, or there's different maybe areas. Sometimes it can spill over into a lot of areas of life. Sometimes it can be daily occurrence that's happening. And so being able to then dissolve this mind chatter that we have and this internal dialogue that we have, it's going to be able to shift our inner world and our mental health, because this, what seems like sometimes a relentless or harsh inner critic, can have a perceived negative effect on, say, our mental health, because we have more anxiety, more depression, lower in our perception, self-esteem. And so it'll increase our quality of life to be able to work through this. Our relationships are also affected when we have self-criticism, because it spills over. You know, your inner world is a reflection of your outer world is a reflection of your inner world. And so the judgment that we have internally can spill over into, and then judge others as a result, and then create that disconnect from the world around us. We can also have difficulty with our decision-making abilities when self-criticism bubbles up, because the harsh criticism or the perception of harsh criticism we have around ourselves can cloud our judgment, because then we perceive that we have self-doubt, we have fear around making decisions, and because of that, we maybe hesitate or procrastinate, frustrate around making a decision. We can't seem to move forward in a way that we'd love. Not to mention changes productivity, because we don't get things going or moving, because the inner critic is paralyzing or freezing us to be able to get what we would love to get done. So what is self-criticism? And so essentially we'd call it a self-evaluation of judgment and being critical of yourself. So we can have judgment of our actions, our decisions, our behavior. We can character trait or physical character trait of ourselves. We can judge our abilities. And so there are two types of criticism that we have. We have both constructive and destructive criticism. And so when we look at, say, constructive criticism, that's when we take our experience of life and we look at our actions and our performance and our behavior, and we analyze it but for the point of growing and growth. And so there is a layer of, I want to develop myself. I want to step up my game. And so I was walking with a potential client the week before, And as we were walking, they were sharing this story of them going into a meeting which had the board of directors of their company, and they're a CEO. And as they were sharing this, the presentation that they had to do, and then the aftermath of that, and they had been analyzing what they did. Did they meet their objective? What did they do? Their strengths, whether they did well, whether they want to work on in terms of presentation. They started to think about, okay, what do I need to do to step up? Hence why we're having a conversation. And so there was the growth in that. But then a destructive self-criticism is when it's harsh. And harsh is a feeling, but it's like harsh, perceived negative criticism. And so it's normally focused on the mistakes that you made, the flaws you have, the imperfections, the self-doubt, brings about low self-esteem. And so imagine that same conversation that this client or potential client had, having the conversation. They said at this meeting, and then said, I was a failure, I didn't meet my objective, I didn't get my message across, I didn't get an outcome, I blame. So there's like harsh self-criticism, there's negative self-talk, there's blaming yourself for what you did or didn't do. Then that leads to self-doubt, and then the negative emotions that bubble up inside. And so today what we're going to explore is that destructive side of ourselves. And so when it comes to that perception of destructive self-criticism, there's two components I want to focus on with that. And one is because we want to know where does it come from, and how is it created, essentially. Because when we can understand human behavior and the dynamics and the creation of it, then we can go and find the problem underneath the problem and go and solve it. Because self-criticism is the symptom. Can we call it a symptom? We could call it a symptom. It's a symptom. It's not the problem. And we're really big on maximum growth in our classes that we do and we run each and every week, is really finding that problem underneath the problem, kind of like get a ball of mess, and then you're trying to find that one thing that's going to help unravel a lot of other dynamics for you. And so self-criticism can be there are a number of reasons, but I'm going to give you two that stand out. And that is an internalization of an authority, and that's the voice that's coming through. So an internal voice of authority. And so this inner critic that we have in our mind can be stemmed from or created from our childhood. And so clearing those emotional charges that we have on the individuals can help to dissolve the content of the criticism. So our inner critic can originate from childhood and the experiences that we have and the messages that people who took care of us, our parents, siblings, relatives, teachers, and their voice ends up becoming our voice. So those early experiences and how we perceived the outside world becomes our perception of our inner world. And so then what we want to do is when it comes to our internalization of this authority voice, it can come from like early conditioning. So when we have these highly impressionable, they say up until 7, highly impressionable in our early formative years. And so if we watch our parent be critical of themselves and call themselves stupid or and berate themselves or berate another partner, then we can internalize that perspective and make it our own. We can form the beliefs of whatever the belief is. I'm not good enough. I don't deserve money. I don't deserve a relationship. No one loves me. And so the belief formation that happens in early childhood is formed because you've taken on the beliefs of what your parents or people around you, maybe it's even if it could even be like academically, if you don't perform academically, which is a big one for some people, if you don't perform academically, then the result of that is you're inadequate, unintelligent, not smart, as a result of your performance-based. And so then that belief system spills over into your adult life. And if and permeates that, because then you see the lens of the world about being inadequate, not intelligent enough, and that still continues to filter into your everyday life today. So we also want to note that the early formation of our authorities, self-criticism, or the voice of self-criticism from an authority figure, is also that it becomes like an automatic response. So we don't even notice we're doing it. We don't even notice that we're in that self-criticism. It isn't like we consciously thought of it and then we start to think about it more. Sometimes it just automatically pops up for us. And so it pops to the surface and it delivers this self-criticism to us, but without what sometimes feels like without a conscious control of it. And so that's a great feedback mechanism to let us know that maybe this is an internalized voice, not necessarily it's not necessarily our perception, it's someone else's perception of us, or something we've formed due to someone else's model or view of the world. So what I'm seeing or listening to when I'm coaching people and I'm hearing, the beginning of their story and they're telling me things, I'm starting to listen to them. I'm trying to hear what they're telling me, and I'm asking them questions about their lives and about their family and about their parents and their relationships and their intimate relationships. And I'm starting to gather information to find, are these perceptions that they have in themselves, are they a perception of for them, or is it because of an internalized authority figure that we go and work on, mother, father, brother, whoever the dynamic is, and then that will help to quieten down and lessen the self-criticism or the internal dynamic that's happening. So you'd be asking yourself, like, who is this voice, or is this my voice or someone else's? That's one component that we want to look at with self-criticism. The second component is around your inner and outer world interconnectedness, because they're looped in together. To think that they're separate, your outer world is separate from your inner world, is a misconcept. So your inner world and your outer world are reflected of each other. And so and this is a beautiful concept that we really want to truly grasp and understand when it comes to human behavior and human dynamics, because you don't see the world as it is, you see the world as you are. And so when we really understand that, we are able to understand if there's inner world criticism, what's really going on, what's the dynamic between the outer world and the inner world. So anytime we have dynamics at play, so a dynamic is where two parts are playing in with each other, we want to understand there are multiple, like, human behavior is so complex and interesting, and there's so many layers, and so you can't just say one thing equals another and then that's what we have to focus on, because it's not the case, because every individual is different, everyone's wired differently. But what we want to be looking at is a lens with self-criticism around, is it a projection? So when someone is criticizing and judging someone else in their outer world, my instant ears go, whoa, here's a beautiful insight into the inner world of this particular individual, because it's known as projection. They project their inner world and project it onto the outer world. And so whatever they don't want to deal with the inner struggle of what's going on. So it's easier to deflect their own stuff and then work on that. So then there needs to work on their own insecurities or self-criticism, and it's easy to focus on the outer world than the inner world. So that's one layer when I look at if there's external criticism, but we're focused on that internal criticism today. So we also then look at the layer of self-reflection, because the outer world is a reflection of the inner world. So if I hear someone who is observing individuals and they're noticing people around, and they start to notice that they're supportive and they've got this, like, I want to help, then that's a beautiful insight and reflection of their inner world, what their inner world is like, and how they talk to themselves, how they talk to others outside. That dynamics can be there as well. Hopefully you're finding this interesting. Tell me, share with me. I'd love to hear in the comments below. So we also have this thing called emotional resonance. So emotional resonance is like our emotional reactions to the external world are beautiful cues to the internal world. So someone who's like overly angry and maybe they're hypercritical at small things, it may be because there's unresolved anger inside of their mind that's yet being dealt with, and that's why they become hypercritical of the outside world, because it's a little feedback of things that they need to work on in their inner world. Then we also have, because we're looking at that outer world, inner world dynamic, we also look at attachment. So attachment is that I want my world to be one-sided, trying to live against universal principles and laws. And so if we did a beautiful in-depth question on this, which is the 3 universal principles, and one of that is looking at that kind of duality and knowing they're both there. But when we attach to one side and we want the world, say, to be praising and kind and generous and funny and intelligent and bright, then because of this attachment to our certain traits, actions, and inactions, we can then internalize its inverse within. So the external world, I just want it like this, and because there's not room there to have both sides, it has to manifest somewhere, because both sides are there, so it manifests internally. So the internal criticism can be a byproduct of the external attachment to praise. And so when we know and understand this outer world, inner world connectedness, we get to understand that human behavior is part of a dynamic. And to isolate it just in itself, and just to say work on the self-criticism and what's working on the inside, but never looking at the parental dynamic or the authority figures and not clearing that, not also looking at the external internal world dynamic that's happening, maybe there's past things that are unresolved that can be worked on, then if we just isolate the self-criticism and just work on that, we're actually not even hitting the surface of being able to clear this dynamic. So that's why we want to have this really beautiful 360 rounded whole view of criticism or self-criticism, and trying to unpack them and unravel what's really truly going on. And so to think that you could do it in a session, depending on how much internal self-criticism you have, you may actually have to do quite a bit. So what would be the best antidote then to silencing your inner critic? I'm going to give you 3 strategies, and that would be, it's neuroplasticity. So you've got this wiring inside of your brain, which is around that self-criticism. So what we want to be able to do is we want to change that wiring. And to be able to do that, it's going to take work. And that's what I love most about the Demartini method, is every time you apply a quality question, it does give you that opportunity to rewire your brain. And so instead of experiencing the self-criticism, that by working on the emotional charges that are creating that dynamic and those thoughts, you dissolve those, and therefore the self-criticism starts to minimize and maybe even completely dissolve. We don't ever, just FYI, newsflash, we never actually want to completely silence. Like, we don't want to silence our inner critic, like, shh, don't talk, silence, no talking. It's not like that. It's not like this minimizing and I don't want you to talk. What happens is, as we dissolve the components around it, just as a byproduct, it just silences it, because you hear your one intuitive voice inside, as opposed to the many voices and the fragmented emotional charges around you. We also want to recognize the source of our inner voice. So, and this may apply for some, it may not apply. It's not a rule that applies for every single individual. But you want to ask, who's this voice? Is it truly mine? Does it belong to someone else? Does this sound like my parent or my caregiver in some way, the teacher? And then go and work on that particular individual if that bubbles up inside of you, and dissolve any perceived negative or positive, apply side A and side B of the Demartini method on that particular individual. Then we also want to look at that beautiful dynamic of that external internal ecosystem. And that's where the real magic starts to happen, because if we have an attachment to one, it's going to be the source of your suffering. So if we have an attachment to a positive, kind, generous, praising world, it's going to create suffering internally. So we want to be able to find what the drawbacks of that side is, and the drawback to indirectly shift this dynamic. So we work on that to change the inner world. So that is a wrap for our silencing your self-critic and your inner critic. Hopefully you found this interesting and insightful. I would love to hear your comments and thoughts, so feel free to share below if you've got and want to continue this conversation, want to share some of your insights, feel free to do so as well.